Chapter 3. The Deadline. After its merger with Jefferson County, the newly expanded city of Metro Louisville became, population-wise, the 28th largest city in the United States. It had more people than the state of Wyoming and almost as many as Vermont. The new Louisville's economic numbers improved, on paper at least, as data from the affluent suburbs was combined with that of the former inner city. But the merger hadn't incorporated everything. There remains within the borders of Metro Louisville a myriad of second, third, fourth, fifth, and even sixth-class cities, little enclaves of semi-autonomy that boasted their own governments and services. Within the city limits of Louisville there can still be found, as an example, a town called West Butyl, population 1,230. They have a nice city hall, a mayor, 7 council members, at least 11 policemen, and 2 police cars. The rest of Butyl was absorbed into the newly expanded Louisville, but apparently West Butylians decided that they needed to preserve some semblance of their own identity. Or so we can only suppose. My wife and I found ourselves in the midst of one of those city-within-the-city enclaves when we returned to Louisville in the late 90s. After a nearly 20-year absence, I moved back into the little house in the serious man's suburbs that my father had built to help my aging, ailing mother pack up her things and move to Paducah, where she could be near the medical services that her rich doctor son-in-law could connect her with. The unincorporated neighborhood of my youth had been absorbed into the city of Jeffersontown, which also had its own mayor, city council, police force, and managed services like garbage and recycling pickup for its 26,000 residents. It was and still is home to the world headquarters of Papa John's Pizza, which moved there long before John Schnatter made a complete ass of himself. It's time to bring my wife out of the shadows and turn her into the real human being that she is. Carolyn Fortin was born in Chicoutimi, Quebec, a town 5 hours northeast as the car drives from Montreal. Because of her, I now know that the earth really is flat, because I've seen the edge. It's about 5 miles north of Carolyn's hometown. You can just stand there and peer into the abyss. The city of Chicoutimi no longer exists. In 2002, it engaged in a merger of its own with the cities that surrounded it, and Saguenay is now the name of the combined mini-metroplex. The town sits near the head of the Saguenay River, which flows eastward through a fjord and then into the St. Lawrence Seaway, not far from where the St. Lawrence empties into the Atlantic Ocean. The fresh water of the Saguenay and the saltier water of the St. Lawrence begin to mix at the town of Tadoussac, and that creates an ideal environment for krill, which live in abundance there. Naturally, the presence of so much krill draws whales to the region, and belugas, minks, fins, and giant humpbacks can all be found in the waters near Tadoussac. Once in a while, a couple of blue whales even show up. Naturally, the presence of so many whales draw tourists to the region, and scads of mostly French and Italian sightseers can be found there as well, all chasing after the perfect whale tail pick on inflatable Zodiac boats. In the summertime, of course. In the wintertime, the Saguenay region becomes fret, a special French-Canadian word that no real French person would understand. It means, in essence, fucking cold. On one of my first trips to Chicoutimi, I felt a sting of -40 on my face. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about Celsius or Fahrenheit, because that's where the two scales cross. It was so damned cold that I was forced to wonder why I couldn't have met a girl from Florida. Carolyn studied linguistics at the University of Ottawa, the alma mater of Alex Trebek. She jumped at the chance to study for a year at the Universität Freiburg in Germany, and it was there that we met through a mutual friend. When I lived in Germany, I rarely went back to the United States at Christmas time because I almost always went back in January for a conference. In December of 1986, not long after Carolyn and I met, I spent Christmas in Freiburg with her and 6 very other homesick Canadian exchange students. I brought a frozen turkey and some cheesy Christmas lights that I'd bought at the Army PX, and on Christmas Eve we stole into the woods, chopped down a little tree, and drug it back to their dormitory. That was totally illegal, of course. Almost everything in Germany is illegal, except for driving like a mad banshee on the speed-limitless autobahns. Freiburg sits at the edge of the Black Forest, and the woods there really are lovely, dark, and deep. In Germany, as in most of the Christian world, Christmas Eve is a much bigger deal than Christmas Day. The Germans call it Heiliger Abend, or Holy Evening. When we chopped down our little tree that night, we drug it back to Carolyn's dormitory through the snow, past a little chapel in the woods where people were singing Christmas hymns by candlelight. It was a living picture postcard, and neither of us will ever forget it. It was also because of Carolyn that I met our buddy Terry McCoy, the guy who beat Mitch McConnell for junior high school student council president, and his wife, Martha. Terry and Martha are a couple of Peace Corps kids from the 60s, and they have lots of fun peacenik stories to tell. I'm not going to recount any of those stories here. I wouldn't dare steal their thunder, and I would mess them up anyway. After Terry studied law at Duke, Martha became a surgeon at the University of Louisville School of Medicine. She did it in the 1970s, and by then the school had stopped offering bloodletting as a major. It's still tough for a woman to survive in the testosterone-filled world of surgical medicine. Imagine what it must have been like for Martha to do it in the 1970s. Like Frank Burke, Terry was one of Carolyn's students at the Alliance Française. During one class session, they engaged in an exercise that was designed for students to respond to "Have you ever?" with "No, I have never," in proper French, of course. Carolyn asked intentionally outlandish questions to prompt the desired negative response. When she came to Terry, she asked him, "Have you ever flown on the Concorde?" "Why, yes, I have," Terry said. "And Paul and Linda McCartney were on our plane." Asshole. I really like Terry, but I rarely pass up the chance to remind him how much that story pisses me off. Carolyn and I had no intention of staying in Louisville when we moved there to help my mother, but we discovered that we liked the place. Louisville delivers good bang for the buck. It has a vibrant arts and culture scene, 3 Olmsted parks, a slew of fine restaurants, and its real estate prices are, by national standards, very affordable. Being city folk, though, we didn't want to live in the serious man suburbs where I'd grown up. We started house hunting in one of the cool parts of town, the hippy-dippy Highlands. The Highlands are a sort of Midwestern Haight-Ashbury, where kids with green hair and man buns can be found smoking hookah pipes at sidewalk cafes. It's the neighborhood where Hunter S. Thompson grew up. In the Louisville suburbs, by contrast, people scurry into cheesecake factories for some triple kilocalorie fettuccine alfredo and into megachurches where they fervently try to pray the gay away. By far the largest of Louisville's megachurches is Southeast Christian, known colloquially as Six Flags Over Jesus. It's so big that the church offers shuttle bus service between its many buildings and its expansive parking lot. Six Flags Over Jesus is still listed as the 4th largest megachurch in the United States. After merger, the new Metro Louisville's borders became closely aligned with those of the Kentucky 3rd Congressional District, except for a few little gerrymandered tendrils that stuck in and out of Jefferson County. In the years since Gene Snyder wrested control of the district's House seat away from Frank Burke, the 3rd had been represented by 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, including Gene. It was a seat once held by Henry Clay, who for a time was Speaker of the House, Secretary of State, and who, along with his buddy Daniel Webster, helped to found a Republican Party. Not the Republican Party that we all know and so love today, but at least it was a Republican Party. Eventually, Clay's Republicans morphed into something called the Whigs, which sounds a lot cooler than Republicans anyway. The longest-serving of the 3rd Congressional District's representative was a Democrat named Romano Mazzoli, a radiant and popular guy who'd held office for 24 years. He was succeeded by another Democrat, Mike Ward, who only lasted a single term before he was ousted by a Republican named Ann Northup. In those days, the Kentucky 3rd was something of a swing district, pitting as it did the African-American West End and the hookah pipe-smoking hippie neighborhoods against the cheesecake-eating, gay-away-praying suburbs. The demographics of the district slightly favored Democrats, but their electoral success required a significant number of hippies to step away from their hookahs long enough to go vote. If they failed to do so, Republicans prevailed, and by the time of the midterm elections of 2006, Ann Northup was on a 5-game winning streak. She was about to try and make it 6. Northup came from a prominent Louisville family. Her sister, Mary T. Meager, won a boatload of medals as an Olympic swimmer. She probably would have won a lot more had Jimmy Carter not dissed the American Olympic team in the Soviet Union in 1980. I met Northup once at some kind of an alumni give-me-money function, and I found her to be a perfectly lovely person. She's also a diminutive person. I'm 6'2", and I spent most of our 5-minute conversation looking down at the top of her head. But she was a member of Congress, and I was just a hairy ape. Sometime in November of 2005, I wandered into the headquarters of the Louisville Democratic Party, which was housed in a rundown storefront of a building in, where else, the hippy-dippy Highlands. When I stepped inside, I found a 30-something man talking to a 20-something woman about some boxes that had just been delivered. I waited patiently for them to determine a proper fate for the boxes, and then 30-something man asked me, "Can I help you?" Sure, I said. Who are you guys going to run against Ann Northup? I'd come to volunteer for whoever it was going to be. 30-something man paused for a minute, trying to turn the gears in his head, and then he said, maybe Jack Conway? Conway was a Louisville attorney who'd been beaten by Northup in 2002. The Democratic Congressional Committee urged him to try a rematch in 2004, but he declined. Conway already lost to her, I said to 30-something man. Who else you got? Neither of the two box people could come up with a name. Jesus, I thought to myself, these guys got nobody. By the fall of 2005, all across the United States, veterans of the Second Gulf War were coming out of the woodwork to run as Democrats for Congress. They'd seen the ridiculous debacle in Iraq firsthand, and like a lot of us, they wanted to do something about it. But Ann Northup had beaten the crap out of her last opponent in 2004, and even the left-leaning Courier-Journal, Louisville's flagship newspaper, had endorsed her in that race. Running against her could be political suicide. But Louisville Democrats needed to find somebody, and the deadline to file and run in the primary was rapidly approaching. In mid-December, an Iraqi war vet finally stepped up. His name was Andrew Horn, and he was also a local attorney. He had no prior political experience, but his candidacy immediately drew a bit of national attention. It wasn't long before Horn showed up on CNN with the bumptious Lou Dobbs. Andrew Horn, you're critical of the president's handling on the war in Iraq. Why so? Dobbs asked. Well, Lou, I went to Iraq because I was concerned about the safety of my children and the security of this country, Andrew said, and that's the same reason I'm in this race. Really, Andrew, I thought. You really think that Iraq is a threat to us? After a bit more back and forth about the war, Dobbs pivoted to trade. Let's talk about free trade. Congressman Northup, a vigorous supporter of free trade. Are you? I lost, Lou. I can't hear you. I don't have any feed in my earpiece, Horn said, and then he began to fumble around with the side of his head. Oldest trick in the book, a friend told me later. Get a question you don't want to answer, fake an audio fail. Works every time. A few days later, I went to hear Horn speak at a meeting of the Louisville Metro Democratic Club. He seemed like a nice guy, but he offered up a bunch of vapid bromides that left me feeling very uninspired. I couldn't blame him, really. It seemed obvious that he was being coached to play to a swing district crowd. But my enthusiasm for his candidacy waned. I just can't seem to get behind him, I complained to a couple of buddies a few days later as we were gabbing about Horn. We were having a beer at the Bambi Bar, a ramshackle wreck of a Louisville institution that sits near the southern edge of the hippy-dippy highlands. It was built by Louisville's earliest settlers, or at least it looks like it was. Everybody in Louisville knows about the Bambi, and almost everybody has been there at least once. The Bambi Walk is Louisville's version of a London pub crawl. Walkers and crawlers start at the Bambi, and then they proceed north along Bardstown Road through the heart of the Highlands, stopping at every joint along the way to down as many beers, bourbons, and jello shots as they can handle. I've only done the walk once, and that was one time too many. The Bambi is also the place where many a great political plot has been hatched. At least it was where mine was about to be hatched. Why don't you run? Matt asked me. Matt Fleitz was one of the software engineers who worked for our little consulting firm, and he was a political junkie. He'd just finished telling me about how Mike Ward had screwed up when he lost his seat to Ann Northup. Me? I asked him. I'm not qualified. Neither is Horn, Matt countered. You have as much defense experience as he does. He had a point. I'd had a couple of beers. Yeah, I told him. Why don't I run? I looked at the other guy in our group, Doug Lorenz. Doug was Matt's brother-in-law. He'd been a college baseball star. Now he was a math professor. He was Rhodes Scholar material. Why don't you run? I said to Doug. He looked at me like I was crazy. Doug was way too smart to do something stupid like run for Congress. I wasn't. It was that Monday it was, the 30th of January, 2006. The deadline for filing as a candidate in Kentucky primaries was a little more than 24 hours away, and I found myself driving down Interstate 64 from Louisville to Frankfort, the capital of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, with a check for $500 in my pocket. A lot of states require candidates to collect a bunch of signatures to prove their bona fides before they're allowed to file. If that had been the case with me, I wouldn't have been doing what I was doing. I was way too lazy to go pound the streets for something like that. On the interstate, I passed a semi-truck from a company called Covenant Transport. It had a slogan painted on its trailer. It is not a choice, it is a child. After I got off the highway, I pulled into a gas station just to give myself one last chance to chicken out. I bought a bag of corn nuts and I stood in the gas station parking lot, crunching on the toasted corn and thinking. Who the hell do you think you are? A little voice in my head taunted me. You're not Romano Mazzoli. You're not Frank Burke. You're certainly not Henry fucking Clay. I know that, I countered to the little voice, but if Gene Snyder can do it, so can I. I finished the bag of corn nuts. Maybe it was the Kennedys. Maybe it was the stupid war. Maybe it was PBS. Or maybe it was just that asshole Gene Snyder. I decided that I was going to do it. All right then, I said to myself, I'll go to hell. I pulled into a parking lot in front of the Kentucky Capitol and I stopped behind a Toyota Prius that was plastered with bumper stickers. Keep abortion legal. Kill your television. My country invaded Iraq and all I got was this expensive gas. I trudged up the steps, filed my papers, and parted with my $500. I was in.